Welcome back to Absolute Scenes, our series where we review IMDb's 100 films to see before you die. Tonight, we have Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, directed by Michael Gondry in 2005, written by Charlie Kaufman, and starring Jim Carrey and Kate Winslet in yet another bohemian romance, although a lot less loving this one. This is a story of two people that meet in a time of their lives where things aren't going particularly well, or they're feeling lost, they're feeling lonely, and they come together only to find out that they are so different to each other that they actually want to erase each other from each other's memories, which is quite an original idea. So the story, as it unfolds, is Jim Carrey trying to erase Kate Winslet and their relationship from his memory. Now, on the show tonight, we have our good friend Ian, who informed me a very long time ago that this was his favorite film of all time, along with Jurassic Park, two very, very, very different films. Ian, welcome to the show. What do you love about this film so much?
I think for me, this film always stood out as being super original, and I found it a very realistic take on a sort of modern love story. It doesn't romanticize everything. It shows the reality behind relationships, that everything's not perfect. There's a lot of things can go wrong, and I think it shows in a situation or a society where something like memory erasing existed, that people would make rash decisions and just jump into big things like that, because people do that with things all the time. And I just love how original it is. I love the characters. I love all of the actors who were in it. Some big actors who are still starting out in their careers at this point.
Well, we're glad to have you on. Mitchell, have you ever seen this film before? What was the expectation going into it?
Yeah, I've never seen it before, actually. And I think for that is because I usually give Jim Carrey a wide berth, with the exception of Truman Show, which I love. I find him a bit annoying usually, so I just steer clear of it on that basis.
Ian, would you like to take Mitchell's spot on the show, saying that he's speaking utter blasphemy right now? Ace Ventura, Dumb and Dumber, acting masterpieces these are, Mitchell.
I just find them annoying, Dan. I've got to say, just plays an annoying character in all those films. I can't stand it.
I think that's how this film's flew under the radar for a lot of people, because Jim Carrey's a hugely polarizing actor. He's seen as the Joker, the idiot. He always plays daft roles and just daft films.
He was actually the Riddler, Ian, not the Joker.
The Riddler, daft roles anyway. Comedians, either way. And those type of films are quite an acquired taste. So I think when you see stuff like I Love You, Philip Morris, The Truman Show, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, it's getting over that Jim Carrey starring in it is one of the biggest hurdles. I love Jim Carrey personally, but I think for a lot of people that's a big hurdle.
I think it works the other way as well, where people that love Jim Carrey for The Mask, Dumb and Dumber, Ace Ventura, Me, Myself and Irene, when they see him in more dramatic roles like this, or The Number 23, pictures like that, they might not like it either. It's difficult because people that don't like Jim Carrey don't give him a chance. People who do sometimes don't like this new direction that he takes. I've never seen this film before either. I've heard a lot about it, and it's been something I've been fairly interested in watching for a long time, especially since you've spoken about it, Ian. But I'd never really got round to. And if I'm being honest, I didn't have a clue what it was about. I didn't know that it was about people erasing their memories or specific memories. It's not just a case of dementia or you feel like you're in a coma. It is plotting out the individual memories that you have of a person. The one thing that I noticed that it's impossible not to notice when someone like Charlie Kaufman is writing, is that this is not a normal narrative. It jumps around, obviously, especially when he uses the framing device of being inside Jim Carrey's brain. And is that something that you really liked about this, that this wasn't just a linear narrative? It was something far more creative than that.
Yeah, I was definitely drawn into it because of that. I tend to really not like dream sequences in films. In fact, I hate them. When I think in a film when it drifts off into a dream sequence, or somebody is imagining seeing people, and I get quite sucked out the film. I just think, oh, this isn't working for me. Whereas the way the dream sequences are handled in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which I think we'd have to talk about a bit more on the spoiler side of things. For me, it's way more gripping. It's way more thought out. There's been a lot of thought put into how those dream sequences are handled, and to make it believable that this procedure could actually exist.
Mitchell, what did you make of that sort of frenetic style?
Yeah, I found it a bit of a challenge, actually. Understanding what was going on with each scene. I thought some of the editing of the dream sequences was absolutely fantastic, but there was almost so much of it driven by that style that I was struggling to stick with the storyline at certain points. It is funny you mentioned about Charlie Kaufman and the screenplay, because I was watching with Sharon, and we hadn't talked about who had written it or anything like that, and she said, "Oh, this is just like being John Malkovich. This hated that one, hate this one," and so you can see the similarities in some of it. But I think it's a nice story. I think the message in it is very pleasant. I think when you take a step back from it.
That's interesting. I find the message completely the opposite of that, which is we'll talk about that in spoilers though, but that's really interesting. That can be the first thing we'll talk about in spoilers, that you've got a pleasant message and I got an incredibly nihilistic one.
Sorry, I got an incredibly pleasant message from it all. I think it's a great message.
I'm just miserable, quite clearly.
Yeah, Dr. Negative over there.
All right then. Sounds like I'm a Marvel supervillain. I'll take it. Speaking of Marvel characters, there are a few in this. We've got Kirsten Dunst as Mary Jane. We've got, I've forgotten his name, Bruce
Mark
Banner.
Ruffalo.
Mark Ruffalo we've got in this. What did we make of all these side characters? Bob and Long, were they funny, engaging, annoying?
I personally didn't get the need for some of the storyline around Elijah Wood's character. I found that a bit annoying. It was like a step too far. Some of the actions that character decided to take, which I didn't feel were fully needed for the story, and it just made it took away a little bit. I'm going to say the word realism here. I know that is not the right word to use for this film because it's talking about this procedure that is completely unrealistic, but it took away a little bit of the realism just in terms of actually like the feelings and stuff they were trying to portray. I didn't see why his character would choose to take some of the actions that he chose to take. It just seemed a little strange to me.
I find Elijah Wood's character leads to, for me, the most important scene in the film, which we can discuss in the spoiler area. But I think without his character, there's a part of the film that wouldn't have worked.
I think the reason why Mitchell dislikes him so much is because he's just a panty sniffer that looks a little too much like Mitchell.
I have been mistaken for him before, to be fair, but I had more hair then.
And he's probably a bit taller.
It's just a bullying podcast now.
I think one of the unsung heroes of this is Kirsten Dunst's character, who has a lovely little subplot herself, and I think that really is intelligently done because it gives weight to other implications beyond the romance of the main protagonist's story, that it allows a much wider conversation to happen. And I think it's impossible to talk about this film without talking about the cinematography at times, the use of lighting, the scene transitions, how it's all incredibly shot. This is one of the most beautiful films I've ever seen. It's absolutely phenomenal.
I think that's probably why I was drawn so much into it, because, I come from a creative background and that's where my passion lies and that's where I work in. And the lighting, the scene transitions, the way the dream sequences are handled, every little detail has been thought about, everything. Like, so watching it, this was probably like my fourth or fifth time watching it. And there's so much you notice going on in the background. Each time you view it, you notice more and more stuff that's been thought about, and you can almost ignore anything that's being said and just watch it through just for the visuals half the time. it's just incredible. I think it's dated quite well. I actually think it's held for being what, a 16-year-old film. It shows how little CGI was used and how well any that was done. The one part I felt a little bit aged, but just so I've got something negative to say, I felt that the score was probably a bit dated. I noticed that. I did pick up on that.
Yeah, I agree. Some of the scene transitions are fantastic. I mean, to think of one that really struck me was when he walked out of the bookstore, and then immediately as he came through the door, he was in his sister's house. I thought that was like, it just struck me as being a fantastic transition. And there's so many of them. You're right. I think like it's almost overkill in terms of how many interesting transitions there are. You're hit with them like every few seconds sometimes with how much is going on. So I do think they're fantastic, but there is just so much of it.
This film isn't perfect. So one thing that you mentioned earlier on, Mitchell, that I agree with you, that I took a lot of sort of thinking about afterwards and picking up on things, was just how difficult this plot was to follow. For something so simple, so much was happening, and I found it really, really difficult. Ian, is this something that benefits a second watch, or did you just nail it first time? Were you tuned in, you got it first time, and it was an amazing experience then? Or is it by watching it multiple times that you feel it's something that's more understandable and more efficient as a narrative?
I'll start off by saying I've only ever watched this film by myself until last night when I watched it with Emma. And at the start of the film, Emma asked why he was on the wrong side of the train platform. So that's how much some people are following it. So I knew I was on a bit of a loser at that point. But I think the first time I watched it, I got it and I appreciated the visuals of it. And I think I got the overarching message, but on watching it again, I then started to appreciate how deep it actually went. I don't think it's a film that you can watch once and kind of fully appreciate. I think there's so much there. And you're right, the pacing of the film, it starts off really quite slow, and it just goes and goes and goes to the point where it's just a mile a minute, where it's just flying all over the place, and then it culminates in, quite a big conclusion. And I think not many people would watch it the first time round and just go, yep, got that, nailed it.
Yeah, I agree with that. As someone who was watching it for the first time, I got the overarching idea of what was happening, but I felt like I was missing so much in each scene about some of the detail. But definitely, I think you can follow the story, although it is a bit challenging and you have to concentrate on it. But I was missing so much. I don't think I was in the detail of it.
And lastly, before we move on to rating and then spoilers, I just want to talk about the relationship between Kate Winslet and Jim Carrey in this. Two actors who I absolutely love, and I like Jim Carrey for both his comedic and his dramatic roles. As long as the film's good, don't really care. And I don't think Kate Winslet's ever put in a bad performance, although some of the films she's been in have been a bit questionable. What did we make of this romance? Is this something that we felt connected to, Mitchell?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, as a romance, I think as the and we'll talk about the message and stuff, but I think it was a believable pairing. The characters and the way they were portrayed by the actors, I think was well done in that respect, and I think they were well cast and well played. I could believe that they were a couple that loved each other but had those challenges that they were telling in the story. So yeah, I could believe it.
For me, I didn't enjoy the romance too much. I understood Jim Carrey's motivation for wanting to love Kate Winslet's character in this, and he outright says why when he's in the diner. I don't want to say why, but he outright says it. But this is a very realistic love story, as Ian said, where it's not a Hollywood romance. This isn't everything's rosy. It actually follows the process where the more in love you are, sometimes the harder love can be. You argue, you bicker, you disagree. And I really appreciated that, and I really understood that. That was something that was fantastic about the story and about their relationship. But I didn't get enough good feelings. And until you see the entire film and probably go back to watch it a second time, when you realize what the hell is happening and that we aren't given all the information, I wasn't invested in their relationship because I never saw them really have a good time. Like occasionally have a nice kiss or occasionally fool around. But at the beginning, that first night when he gives her a call, it's a lovely phone call, but I don't know why it was made. She's not a very likable character, in my opinion. She's, by her own admission, she's not nice. And Jim Carrey seems to want nice, although he obviously wants adventure. And obviously, this was made in a time where that manic pixie girl was a really in thing. It's very similar to sort of 500 Days of Summer as well, but that's not something that Daniel as a 20-year-old would quite like. But me being now in my early 30s, I was just irritated by Ellie the whole time. And Jim Carrey in this film must be in his early 40s, if not late 30s, at the very youngest. So I just don't quite, I didn't get it until the very end when I completely understood it. But at the very end, doesn't matter. I've got to now watch this a second time to feel that connection. And I felt a little cheated in that. I thought they could have worked a little bit harder to develop their relationship positively before showing us the negative aspects meshed in with that, because everyone has a honeymoon period. Ian, you mentioned earlier on that you liked the relationship. What did you like about it?
So I was going to say we might need to come back to some of this once we're discussing spoilers, but the relationship for me worked perfectly. I think for me, you can see the motivations behind both of them. Kate Winslet's characters, you know, she's just at a loss in life. She's a wild child. She just wants to go and do what she wants to do. When she wants to do something, she does it. She's got no boundaries. She's got no limits. There's nothing she hasn't done. So when she meets Joel in quite an ordinary situation that is totally alien to her of being, you know, again, I have to be careful for spoilers, but she's in a very ordinary situation that she just feels uncomfortable in, and she sees this guy who clearly feels the same as her, and she's drawn to it. And then for her, it's this adventure of taking somebody who doesn't even like leaving the house and doing all these fantastic, amazing things, like running around on an iced over lake in the pitch black. And it's an adventure for her, and it's an adventure for Joel, because again, you've got this guy who, you know, his day as he gets up, he goes to work. I think he actually explains what he does on a day-to-day basis. He gets home, he eats, he goes to bed, and that's all he does. So when you've got this person with crazy coloured hair popping up into the scene who shows an interest in you, of course he's going to gravitate towards that. I would say you'd be hard pushed to find a man on earth who wouldn't be, or a woman for that matter. If you're that type of person and you get this eccentric, loving, attractive person showing you attention, yeah, you're going to be all over it.
What we took from that is that Dan is too mature for Kate Winslet, and Ian would do anything for Kate Winslet.
That's exactly it. All I want to do is wash the poor lass's hair. The colouring's fine, but she's gonna have a wash. She's filthy.
It's part of the character, Dan. It's part of the costume.
She doesn't conform.
Part of
Does what she wants.
She'll
wash her hair when she's
this.
down ready to.
Ian, you're welcome. Oh God.
Stop. Go.
So we'll get on to rating this. Ian, obviously, just in case you're not aware, we rate this on 2 scales: technical quality and enjoyment. So we will let you go first, and we start with technical quality. We know you enjoy it. Technical quality out of 10. We're looking at acting, cinematography, plot, the lot.
I think, you know, it's hard to not class as what I'm going to say as bias, because we already know it's my favourite film. The reason I would technically give it the score I'll give is I think the pacing's outstanding, characters, actor choice, the story as a whole, the thought that's gone into it, the visuals, the dream sequences being the best I've seen in any film or TV show. I would give it a 9.5 on the technical scale out of 10.
Woo!
Highest ever score.
Yeehaw. Highest ever score. Mitchell?
Yeah, I think I agree with Ian on a lot of that. There is some very good points to this film. I do think the narrative, the way they've chosen to do it, is easy enough to follow, although I said I was missing some of the detail. The editing style is fantastic, and I think the dream sequences are good, and the acting is I think very good from both. But there are a few problems I have with regards to the plot, which we'll talk about in the spoilers. So I'm going to give it I'll be generous with a 7.5.
7. I'm closer to Ian. I'm giving this a 9. I'm giving it a 9 on the technical quality scale. In fact, no, I'm going to give it a 9.2. I'm going to go higher, 9.2. I think the type of narrative, this screenplay must have been a nightmare to put together. Then the fact that the director can interpret this screenplay is a miracle unto itself. But to add so much style to it, I think the acting's fantastic. I think this film benefits from multiple watches, which is a good thing. If you can sit down and watch a great film multiple times, that has to bump it up. I think it's fantastic.
Do you not know how this screenplay was written, though, Dan? No, he just wrote a normal story and then dropped all the pages on the floor and then picked them up in whatever order they were in.
It makes sense. Makes absolute sense now. Very lucky, very lucky. I'd say it's the ending's at the end. The things that let it down are, I agree with you, Mitch. Elijah Wood's character is absolutely ridiculous. Some of the things that happen are a little ridiculous, although it is a ridiculous film. And it doesn't satisfy every need for a first-time watch with regards to the relationship. I think if once you've seen it twice or the second time you watch it, that'll be absolutely fine. But I am going to knock it down a little bit because you shouldn't have to watch a film twice to understand. So, Ian, again, we know the answer to this question. I think out of 10, how much you enjoyed this film?
I think realistically, going back to how many times I've watched it, I could literally put it on and watch it again now. I would go for a 9.2.
Mitchell?
My attention was just waning in the middle. I felt like I knew where the ending was going to be, and I was just getting a little bored in the middle. So my mind was drifting elsewhere. So I'll give it a 6.
My enjoyment of this film, I'm sorry, Ian, was also it was a 6.8 in terms of enjoyment. I massively appreciated what was going on, but like Mitchell, because I'd sort of lost the comprehension of what was going on in the middle, I did get a little bit bored, and there wasn't enough chemistry between the two characters at that point to keep me invested. I didn't understand the significance of the subplot going on in his bedroom as his memories were getting wiped and what was going to happen there. And like I say, I didn't like their romance. At no point did I think either of those two people were right for each other. And so I kind of thought, yeah, you are probably doing the right thing here. But the ending massively improved the enjoyment factor, but also made me want to watch it again. And I think that's why I've marked it higher on the technical quality scale. Because if I watch this film again and I know what I'm looking for, I know I will have a better time and I know that it will be good. So I'm willing to give it a second chance for sure. It's just, I've got to be honest about the first time I saw it. And I was just sat there thinking I'd rather watch Amelie. So that's our spoiler-free review finished. If you haven't seen the film, go and watch it. Come back, leave in the comments whether you agree with us, disagree with us. There's a pretty wide band here to get on board with. Let us know your own ratings. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel as well. Stick around and we're about to talk spoilers. So Ian, you wanted to kick us off with a spoiler. Now is your opportunity.
So the big spoiler chat I need to address is something that you've both brought up that I probably agreed with on my first viewing was what was the purpose of the side storyline of the 4 additional characters who are running the memory clinic? Now, each time I've watched this, that's become more evident, and I've got my own theory about their purpose in the whole thing. You have the boss, you have the head technician, Mark Ruffalo, you have Elijah Wood, which neither of you have taken too kindly with, and you have Kirsten Dunst. They form the secondary characters in the film behind Jim Carrey and Kate Winslet. So what I like so much about this film is, as I said earlier, that it's very realistic in terms of human relationships and the true human nature, as if people have the masks off, who people really are. And what I love is the fact that it's this high-tech memory clinic that I think 99% of other directors and filmmakers out there would have portrayed as some clinically white, gorgeous, pristine facility with robots flying through the air and stuff. It's just a dump. The place is a dump. There's paperwork everywhere, and it's just these 4 guys running it. And what you have is, in my opinion, you have the spectrum of humanity in that team. You've got the boss who is trying to be a good guy, develop this technique. He thinks he's helping people, but we all know, because of where the story goes with Kirsten Dunst, that deep down he's a bit of a bad guy. You've got Mark Ruffalo, who I would say is a bit better of a guy than him. He's a good guy, just wants to have some fun. He's open to having a bit of a laugh. Again, where the story goes with Kirsten Dunst with him a bit. He's doing the job properly. He's bending the rules for the job. He's going off. He's having a beer. He's not like...
Were you watching this film, Ian? He's literally meant to be monitoring this guy who's having brain trauma to him, and decides to get stoned and have sex in his bedroom while he's lying there. This is a bizarre spectrum of humanity.
But the point is, though, that goes back to my original point of what the expectation of this team is in a normal film compared to the way this filmmaker chooses to show them is how people actually act. What a lot of people, yes, it's it's dramatized for the sake of a film. It takes them the extremes a bit, but for me, the message there is, you've got this company who's all high tech, and what they look like from the outside is they're meant to be this amazing company that does this and that. When in reality, they're just a bunch of slackers and this and that. Out of the 4 characters, I think Mark Ruffalo probably had the best intentions. He was just a bit of a party animal. You then have Kirsten Dunst, who deep down I think is quite an innocent character, and you see that in her redemption in the end of our storyline. She's infatuated with her boss. She just wants to be part of the team. She wants to learn more. She just wants to be around it. And then you have Elijah Wood, who for me is the sort of root of all evil in the film. He's there to manipulate what they're doing for his own benefit. He's not doing what Mark Ruffalo's doing and just neglecting his duties and having a good time. He's actively doing something wrong and to the detriment of somebody else's life. And he knows he's doing it, and he's doing it deliberately. And coming back to what I said earlier about him having one of the most important parts of the film focuses on Jim Carrey slowly hearing snippets of them as he's dreaming, or he's got the thing on his head. When Elijah Wood's kind of messing with what you've said is Kate Winslet's brain damage, and he repetitively uses the word nice, there's a point where she snaps, and it's at that point in the car where she starts to realize that something's really not right, that she gets it, and it's from that point that she seriously goes into a downward spiral of having a mental breakdown. And for me, that links back to why her and Joel are right for each other, because the pair of them aren't right for anybody else. Yes, they're not perfect, but they fit together and work.
I don't think it's that believable that someone would be so manipulative to think there's a woman who you've removed some of her memories from her, and as you were doing it, you decided you fancied her, and then you were going to start using all the memories that she had with her previous boyfriend to manipulate the situation and pretend to create these memories of you and her together. I just don't feel that was that believable, and I don't think it needed to happen. I mean, he could have been lying in the machine and overheard them talking just based on, he could have found a book, or Jim Carrey had to bring his memories in. They could have taken the book out with them and decided to read through it whilst they were sitting next to him. he still could have heard those things happening to him without this additional requirement for Elijah Wood to be this really creepy guy that I'm just not sure it was really necessary when the film is touching upon such real emotions and real like trying to provoke the thought of two people can love each other, and that love is a result sometimes of these memories that they've got together. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, but they're all lived experience that you have together that forms the love and relationship you have. So I think it just detracted from some of the messaging of the film that Elijah was this kind of strange character.
Do you not think what you've just said there is exactly why his character was included? Because the purpose of that was to show that you can't create love. He had all the building blocks there to do it. He had all of the memories that she enjoyed, all of the happy memories that she wanted to erase. But the fact was, he wasn't Joel. That was the only thing he was missing, that he wasn't him, and that's why she didn't fall in love with him. Joel did all of those same things with her naturally, and because it was him, they fell in love. That's how I took it anyway.
I sit somewhere in the middle of both of you, where I like the idea of him stealing her diary, the book, because it serves the thematic question, or the ethical question, which is, what does bad experience do to the human brain, and how does it affect our life moving forward? The thing that I didn't find necessary was making him super creepy in a totally caricature kind of way with regards to him stealing panties and being a complete drip. I didn't like him, which is probably a good thing. But I felt like they just turned him up to 11, whereas what he needed to do was steal that and create this scene, because what it does is provide more context to that question. Should we remove memories that are hurtful to us if we can? And that is what the rest of the film is doing. With Jim Carrey and with Kate Winslet, we are asking this question, in this scenario, would I do it? And that is the personal story there. And with the business side of things, it's an ethical question. Should this even be a thing in the first place? And that is trying to show us on the side of no, because of A, Elijah Wood, and then B, because of Kirsten Dunst's story, where she's actually had it done to her, not realized, and she was effectively forced to do it as well. And then with the positive side of things, with Jim Carrey and Kate Winslet being at the top, we've got this trifecta of moral questions that should form our ultimate conclusions to, is what they are doing ethical, and would we do it ourselves? And it's especially driven home with Kirsten Dunst reading out Alexander Pope's poem, which is just absolutely amazing. And anyone that hasn't read the poem, I recommend you do it. And if you can't do it, I am certain there will be someone on YouTube with a lovely voice reading it as well. That's something that I'd actually highly recommend other people do, because that is the most perfect bit of line delivery in the entire film. Well done, Kirsten Dunst, because it's not easy to pull off a poem like that. And it was such a perfect poem to illustrate this point. It's this, and for anyone that doesn't know the background of the poem, it's about a nun who is writing to her lover. And as she is writing his name, she is forced to grieve because she misses him so much. But without writing the poem, it was an out of sight, out of mind. And that's obviously where these sorts of questions come from, and how important is grief when it's not in terms of death grief, like a bereavement, but in terms of the loss of love and the lessons that failed love teaches us. And it needs all three stories to work. I just think they took Elijah Wood as a character a little too far.
To jump into the point Dan just made about the poem that the film's based around, and the question of, is this right to do, is it not right to do? I think the film hints quite early on that, you know, it's not the right thing to do. So Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, the meaning behind that is, like again, like Dan just said, that out of sight, out of mind. If you clear all these spots from your mind, all the things you don't want to see, all the blemishes, all the bad stuff, yeah, you could live an eternally happy life. However, quite early in the film, I think it's maybe the second time Joel goes to the clinic, you can overhear Kirsten Dunst having a conversation with someone on the phone, quite loud, like they've clearly put it in loud enough to be noticed, saying to someone, you can't come back, we only allow 3 of these a month, you'll have to wait until the 1st of March. And the point is that if you try and erase all the bad things out of your life, you'll spend your life in that clinic getting them erased because, life isn't perfect. And that's the overarching message of the whole film to me. And again, that goes back to the officers being a bit grubby, because from the outside looking in, a memory erasing clinic sounds amazing. In reality, it's a bit of a dump. The team behind it are a mess. Joel and Clementine are an absolute tragedy, the pair of them. But that's life, if you're realistic. And that's why I think it resonated so much with me, because I like to look at things realistically. I don't like films when they try and romanticize stuff and make things look different realistically what they are.
Emma's a lucky girl, Ian, having you. It also implies that if we forget things that we want, that hurt, as a part of that, we will also lose things that are connected to it or that we've experienced to it. And it's only going to be really once you've watched the entire film that are sort of cottoned on to when she says, don't make a joke about my name. And it's like, oh, my darling, oh, my darling, oh, my darling Clementine. And he's like, what are you talking about? Yet when we see how they actually first met with the chicken, he makes that joke. And because he's removed her from his brain, he has now completely forgotten that song exists. And there are so many other things going on there that I need to watch it again, because he would have forgotten so much of his life, which I think is a really interesting just feature to put in there, and something else that again builds how thick this sort of question is. We disagreed on how we felt about this earlier, that you guys found it quite nice and I found it not nice at all. What did you mean by that? How did you find that this had a nice theme at the end?
Well, I think there's lots of pleasant messages to take away. I think it's that element of a lived experience that two people have together is what forms the love between them, and they can be good and bad memories. But also, as you mentioned there, the memories of someone shape who you are as a person. So if you erase the memories of a person, you lose a part of yourself as well, because the things that you've done with that person and the things you've shared and the times you've had, they shape your experience of life and your views on certain things. So you're a product of the people that you care about, spend time with, and love. So I think it's a really pleasant message to think that no relationship that you've had, good or bad, is ever wasted. It's a part of you and who you are. And there's an element here that his love was so strong that it was enough to make him fight this procedure and want to seek that. So I think there's lots of pleasant messages in it.
That's what I mean by the realism of the relationship. I know, you joke about, that sort of thing. The fact is, though, like, that's what a relationship is. It's good and bad. And I think a lot of films try and portray just the good. And then there might be a one-off tragedy where they break up for a day or something. This film uses the bad to show how much of a part of each other's lives they've became, because it shows everybody else is not having perfect lives, because let's face it, nobody's life is perfect. Life doesn't have to be perfect to have an amazing relationship and have amazing relationships with friends and stuff. I mean, the closest thing to a good relationship you see in it is the best friends who sit in the house and the husband spends all his time building helicopters and trinkets and stuff in the garage and yelling at his wife. That's probably the best part of a relationship to show in one. But for me, like the fact that him being removed from Clementine's mind caused her to have essentially a mental breakdown. even though she couldn't remember him, she'd lost so much of who she was and what had made her happy that, you know, it was sending her off a cliff edge.
I agree in the sense that what you guys are talking about, first of all, I mentioned earlier, a lot of the negative aspects of their relationship, the bickering, the misunderstandings, he says one thing and she interprets in a way. Loved it. I thought it was very realistic. I just wanted a bit more nice to offset that. So there was a bit of a juxtaposition going on. And with Mitchell, I totally agree. And that's obviously a message within the film that was something that was my opinion, regardless of the film. That was something that I would have thought anyway. That was actually, I quite like when I watch a film and then it changes my perspective. This film just reinforced my perspective. But ultimately, it's a film and not a work of philosophy. And we are following these characters. So we need to care about these characters. And ultimately, what this film does to these characters is have them build a relationship, forget each other, and then condemn them to each other again because they've had their memories removed. And despite the fact that they know they aren't right for each other, they didn't need to get their minds wiped for that. They just knew that they weren't quite right for each other. Or I think more Kate Winslet's character, and how much negativity they discussed in their meetings before they got their minds wiped, the horrible things they're saying about each other. These two people that should be in a relationship, and because they've had their mind wiped, they are now forced to another couple of years of whatever they've already been through to then eventually be hurt again anyway. So I was like, oh, this is a bit depressing. Whereas I was hoping for a different ending, maybe that they could hinder the theme because it would suggest that, oh, you can't do this and get away with it. So I just think it's one of those positions that a film can work itself into where you have essentially an unhappy ending, in my opinion, to satisfy the need thematically, which is absolutely fine. And I certainly didn't rate it down for that. But my enjoyment of the film was less because of it, because it didn't change my mind. It's not like I thought going into this, oh, I definitely get my mind changed. And then afterwards went, okay, I get this. I kind of felt that way anyway.
Could anybody else have played that role than Jim Carrey? Because for me, no one could have. He was the perfect actor for it. Literally, I think he was perfect. I think if you cut to the scene of one of my favourite scenes and one of the best shot scenes, when he is a child and Kate Winslet is the babysitter, switching from that devastating blow he's had of finding out what's happened and making the decision to go and have Clementine erased from his memory to being a child trying to get cookies out of the fridge and stuff. I'm just not sure there's another actor that could have played that role convincingly.
I'd quite like to have seen like a Ricky Gervais try it. I think he'd be really good at something like this. Because Ricky Gervais, when you see him in Afterlife or Derek, and then the fact that he's a stand-up comedian as well, I think that Ricky Gervais, I mean, it's obviously 16 years old, this film, so maybe not then, but I'd like to see his interpretation of it. But I know what you mean, that regardless of whether anyone else could have played it, you've got Jim Carrey there, and I think he does an absolutely perfect job of it anyway. And one thing that I personally been massively critical on this channel so far is a lack of subtlety in people's acting. And it's just so ironic that the last word you associate with Jim Carrey is subtleness, and yet this portrayal of Joel is filled with subtlety. And I really, really appreciated that. So I definitely wouldn't want him to be replaced by anyone else. That's for sure.
What was, for you, not technically enjoyable in terms of enjoyability, what was your favorite scene in the film?
My favorite scene, I agree. It's a bit like you when you were talking about that. Some of the scenes when they were cutting between his childhood and him as an adult. I liked the one when he was going back to as a kid and he was getting beaten up in the playground, and then he was kind of walking off with that. And, you know, you heard the child voices, and because he was reminiscent on his memories at the same. So it wasn't just his memories with her. He started stepping back through his own personal memories of a child. And he's like, looking back now as an adult, thinking, "Oh, I shouldn't have been like that as a child. I could have done that differently," and stuff like that. So I think that they were nice in terms of, they were fantastic in terms of the way they were shot. You know, it flicked between him as an adult but dressed in the kid's clothing, and then looking at it as the child walking away. So visually, I think it was very impressive. But I also think it was a nice little message in the way that they were moving the story and looking at it from a little bit of a different perspective as well.
I don't have one favorite scene. I have lots of scenes that I loved. I think I've already mentioned it, so I don't want to go too much into it. The best scene for me by an absolute country mile is Kirsten Dunst's delivery of the name of the film. I just think it was absolutely sensational, and it was delivered perfectly, and it really encapsulated everything that the film was about. But I'd say beyond that, the scene again where he's a child and he's using the pillow and then she disappears, I thought that was brilliant. Where they're on the run and the lighting used, the spotlight, I thought that was brilliant. But I think in terms of just a personal moment, I really, really, really enjoyed, sounds mad, the argument that they had. I think they were in a marketplace or just walking in the street where they're discussing children, and he sort of asks her if she's ready and she takes it the wrong way. It's just that is such a real relationship. But I think as far as different editing goes, I think lots of people have their favorite shot. There'll be, the ice rink looking up in different transitions like you were talking about earlier, Mitch. But I think it's such fast paced. They're every couple of, it feels like every couple of seconds, to be honest, although every couple of minutes there is something new to see, to look at, to engage in, that it's really difficult to pull those moments out. Actually, they're so impressive. So I think those little quiet moments are the ones that I really enjoyed personally.
What would you say to the theory that obviously when they are erasing Clementine from his memories, everything that happens is a memory of her. It's her doing it. It's Clementine's actions, her words. What would you say to the scenes where he starts stepping back into his own memories of his childhood and she's there? That's, for me, that's Joel being pulled out into her body, and the bits of, it's the improved self of himself and what he's learned from her when he's being pulled away from the bullies and stuff. That's not Clementine, because she was never in that memory. She wasn't there. So it's as if he's took all of the best parts of her and improved himself, and he's using those to build on. I know there's a sideline of he's hiding her in those memories, but the things that happen and the way the story goes and stuff, that's how I interpreted that.
I agree entirely. I think that's it. I think that's exactly, for me, that was the absolute clear message that was coming out. Those memories, those experiences with people change you as a person. And as I said with that previous scene, he's directly looking at how he actually lived that scene as a child, and then he's with her talking about how he would do it differently now, looking back on that. And that's in part because of how she's changed him.
I never got that, and you explaining it to me, it's so obvious. But there is so much going on with this film that I think you can only focus on one thing at one time. And what I was getting from those scenes was just backstory into why he was the way he was. He's a very unique, introverted, quiet character, which is why I mentioned Amelie before, because she's in this. These scenes were great to go there and to see why he's grown up the way he is, why he is so different, and that's what I was picking up on. But I love that interpretation, and you saying it, I think you're absolutely right. And now I kind of want to go back and watch it some more, which I think just totally encapsulates exactly why I've sort of rated it enjoyment the first time versus its technical quality, because you cannot get this the first time round. Everything, you cannot get everything. You have to go back, and I'm excited. You've made me excited to go back and watch this now. Which I'll be honest, when I finish watching it, I was like, yeah, I'll watch that again and I'll get more stuff. But I wasn't keen to do it. And now I feel like I am.
Question to you both. Would you get anyone erased out of your memory?
Too risky.
Dan, what about you?
I wouldn't beforehand. And I wanted this film actually to pose more questions of why I should, which is, I suppose, one disappointment with it. I wanted a firm secondary voice that this is a great idea, to have that conflict. I think thematically, you kind of want conflict within yourself. That's what resonates most. But I went into this thinking, no, this is a really bad idea. And I came out of it thinking, you've just doubled down on my original belief that no, you shouldn't be getting people erased from your memory.
I was just going to mention a fun scene that I really enjoyed that doesn't bear any relevance on the story. I just thought it was quite funny. Is when where I can never remember his name, Dr. Wozniak, I think he's called. Howard is his first name, maybe. When he's cheating with Kirsten Dunst, and his wife pulls up, and Mark Ruffalo beeps the horn, and his wife comes and decks him. I laugh at that every time. I think it's great. I just think it's brilliant. It just goes to show again, just his character. He's just this guy just trying to get on and do his bit and get decked off people's wives. It's great.
I found it quite weird that he just had sex with a lass and then was wingmanning for his boss who was trying to get it on with her. Was no one else a bit like, what is going on here? Like, either be offended or get yourself involved.
It's just fitting with his character, though. He's just go with the flow. He's not really bothered, is he? I mean, like you said earlier, he's sitting giving someone major brain trauma, but he thinks it's okay to just have a joint and a glass of Johnny Walker. Like, it just didn't fit, and he's just laid back and he's chilled out.
So that's our review discussion on Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Let us know how good this was, and let us know how much you enjoyed it. And if over multiple watches you've enjoyed it more, enjoyed it less, and definitely let us know in the comments, would you let someone erase a person from your mind? And if the answer is yes, let us know who. We're interested in that sort of stuff. Like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter as well at ScenesYT. And we'll see you next time